Long after the last kitchen fire had been lowered, Alara Wynn filled 3 small wooden bowls with warm chicken broth. She moved quietly beneath the dim lanterns, listening for footsteps beyond the kitchen doors. Stormhold Keep had been asleep for nearly an hour, but silence inside a royal palace was never truly safe. Guards changed positions. Servants carried messages that never appeared in official records. Councilmen wandered through corridors they later claimed never to have visited. Alara softened bread in the first 2 bowls. Into the third, she stirred a little goat's milk. Not too much, she whispered to herself. You learned that yesterday. Her hands trembled as she covered the bowls with a folded cloth. She had been doing this for 12 nights. 12 nights of stealing scraps no noble would miss. 12 nights of crawling through dust and darkness toward a place every servant had been ordered to avoid. 12 nights of wondering whether the children behind that wall would still be breathing when she arrived. Alara placed the bowls beneath her apron and crossed the ash room behind the royal kitchens. A narrow corridor waited beyond the storage shelves. At its end stood an old stone wall marked with a faded silver moon. Most servants believed it was solid. Alara had believed the same until she heard scratching behind it. Then she had found the rusted lock beneath years of soot. The key around her neck had belonged to her grandmother, who had once served in the old royal nursery. Alara had kept it because it was one of the few things the woman had left behind. She had never expected it to open anything. The lock clicked softly. Cold air slipped through the hidden opening. Alara glanced over her shoulder before squeezing into the abandoned bread chute. Stone pressed against her shoulders as she crawled. Dust filled her nose. The bowls knocked softly together beneath her apron. Halfway through, she heard boots outside the wall. Alara froze. A guard laughed from the corridor beyond. Still feeding the ghosts, little Omega? His companion answered with a tired grunt. Let her. Perhaps they'll keep her. Their footsteps faded. Neither man opened the sealed door. Neither man wanted to know what waited behind it. Alara continued crawling. When she reached the other side, 3 pairs of pale eyes watched her from the darkness. The old moon nursery had once been beautiful. Faded stars still covered the ceiling. Small wooden wolves stood along the walls. 3 child-sized beds rested beneath dusty blankets. But the fireplace was cold. The windows had been sealed. And the 3 boys huddled together in the corner, as though warmth had become something they no longer remembered. I brought dinner, Alara said gently. The oldest boy, Julian, did not move. At 7 years old, he was painfully thin, but he kept himself between Alara and his younger brothers. Theo, 5, stared at the covered bowls. Little Oliver made a weak sound beneath Julian's arm. Alara sat on the floor several feet away. She uncovered the first bowl, lifted the spoon, and tasted the broth herself. Julian watched her swallow. No silverroot, she said. No bitter flowers. Just chicken, bread, and a cook who will be in terrible trouble if anyone discovers she stole the good salt. Theo's mouth twitched. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. Alara placed the bowl on the stone floor and pushed it toward them. She did not reach for the children. She never did. Julian crawled forward slowly. He smelled the broth before dipping 1 finger into it. Only after tasting it did he pass the bowl to Theo. You eat first, Theo whispered. You're smaller. Oliver's smaller. Alara quietly uncovered the 3rd bowl. This one is his. Julian's shoulders relaxed by the smallest degree. For several minutes, the only sounds were spoons touching wood and 3 hungry children trying not to eat too quickly. Alara watched Oliver carefully. His breathing was shallow, and his skin felt too warm when he finally allowed her to touch his forehead. You stayed awake again, she murmured. Oliver leaned against her hand. That tiny movement nearly broke her heart. She wrapped him in the inside of her cloak and held the bowl near his lips. He drank slowly, while Theo told her that Julian had fought a rat with a broken chair leg. It was large, Julian said defensively. Theo nodded, almost the size of his pride. Alara covered a laugh with her hand. For one quiet moment, the forgotten nursery felt less like a prison. Then a sound traveled through the stone. A deep growl. Not from one of the children. Julian dropped his spoon. Alara rose immediately and moved in front of them. Outside the hidden passage, something enormous scratched against the sealed wall. Far above them, Alpha King Rowan Ashford had returned from war 2 days earlier than anyone expected. He had entered Stormhold without horns, banners, or an honor guard. He wanted no celebration. He wanted only proof that the 3 sons he believed were recovering at Moonwater Abbey were truly safe. But the moment his war wolf crossed the courtyard, Bran refused to follow him toward the royal chambers. The massive black wolf turned toward the abandoned western wing. Bran, Rowan warned. The animal ignored him. It followed a scent beneath the stone corridors, past 2 frightened guards, and directly to a door marked with a royal plague seal. One guard stepped forward. "My king," the council ordered. Rowan looked at him. The man fell silent. Bran pressed his nose to the bottom of the door and released a broken, desperate whine. Rowan's blood turned cold. He knew that sound. The wolf smelled family. Rowan tore the seal away with one hand. The guards backed against the wall as he opened the door and entered the darkness alone. A faint trail of warm broth led him toward an opening hidden behind the old nursery shelves. Then he heard a woman's voice. Slowly, "Oliver. There's enough for all 3. Rowan stopped breathing. That was his youngest son's name. He drew his sword and stepped through the passage. Firelight flickered across a room that should have been empty. A strange woman knelt on the floor with Oliver wrapped inside her cloak. Theo clutched an empty bowl. Julian stood before them, shaking with exhaustion. For one terrible heartbeat, no one moved. Then Rowan stepped closer. Julian's eyes flashed gold. The 7-year-old prince shifted halfway into his wolf form and placed his small body between the stranger and the Alpha King's blade. A weak growl rose from his throat. Not at the woman, at his own father. Rowan stared at the bruises around his son's wrists. Thin lines of royal silver had burned into the child's skin. "Julian," he whispered. The boy did not lower his claws. "She didn't lock us in," Julian said. "She came when we cried." Behind him, Oliver buried his face against Alara's chest. Rowan's sword slowly lowered. Then Julian looked toward the dark passage and whispered the words that turned the king's shock into something far more dangerous. The man with the black ring said, "You were never coming back." Julian's words seemed to remain in the air long after his trembling voice faded. Rowan stood motionless in the forgotten nursery. His sword hung loosely at his side, its point nearly touching the stone floor. He had faced men who lied while dying. He had heard prisoners invent entire kingdoms to escape judgment. But no child spoke those words with such quiet certainty unless someone had taught him to believe them. "Who wore the ring?" Rowan asked. Julian's golden eyes flickered toward the dark passage behind his father. "I don't know." "What did it look like?" "Black." The boy swallowed. "Like thorns." Rowan felt something tighten beneath his ribs. Several noble houses wore black stone. More than one used thorns in its crest. The answer was not enough to accuse anyone, but it was enough to begin a war. Oliver whimpered softly inside Alara's cloak. Rowan turned toward the sound. His youngest son's face was thin. His lips were pale. One tiny hand clutched the rough fabric at Alara's shoulder as though releasing it would cause the entire room to disappear. Rowan took one careful step forward. Oliver immediately buried his face against her chest. The rejection struck with more force than Rowan expected. He had imagined his sons running toward him when he returned. He had carried that picture through 3 weeks of snow, blood, and sleepless nights. It had been the one thought capable of pulling him home. Now his own child hid from him. Alara's arm tightened protectively around the little boy. Rowan's gaze snapped to her. She lowered her eyes, but she did not release Oliver. "Give him to me," Rowan said. Her breathing changed. It was the smallest hesitation, but he noticed. "He's frightened," she answered. "He is my son." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Then give him to me." Alara looked down at Oliver. The child's fingers had turned white around her cloak. "He may go to you," she said softly, "but he should choose the moment." The room went still. No servant spoke to an Alpha King that way. No Omega stood between a ruler and his own blood. Rowan's wolf rose beneath his skin, angered by the challenge. Then Julian moved closer to Alara. Theo did the same. 3 starving princes had placed themselves around a woman whose name Rowan did not even know. He slowly returned his sword to its sheath. "What is your name?" "Elara Wynn." What pack? None. Who sent you here? No one. Rowan studied her face. She looked exhausted. Dust stained her dress. Tiny burns marked her fingers from years beside kitchen fires. Nothing about her suggested noble training or military discipline. Yet she had entered a sealed royal wing 12 nights in a row. No ordinary servant could have done that without help. Captain Ward, Rowan called. Heavy footsteps approached from the passage. Captain Elias Ward entered with 4 guards behind him. The men stopped the moment they saw the princes. One guard whispered a prayer. Another turned pale. Elias looked as though someone had struck him across the chest. My king, close every gate, Rowan ordered. No messenger leaves Stormhold. No report reaches the council until I give permission. The guards exchanged nervous glances. Rowan noticed. He noticed everything now. Take Alara Wynne to the eastern questioning room. Julian bared his small teeth. No. The single word came out rough and frightened. Alara touched his shoulder carefully. It's all right. They'll hurt you. No one will hurt her, Rowan said. Julian looked directly at him. You weren't here before. The boy's words carried no accusation. That made them worse. Rowan held his son's gaze for several painful seconds. Then he turned to Elias. No chain. Alara was escorted from the nursery. Oliver cried the moment she crossed the doorway. The sound followed Rowan through the stone corridors. It did not stop. The eastern questioning room contained no instruments of torture, though its bare walls and iron door had frightened many prisoners into believing otherwise. Alara sat at a narrow table with her hands folded in her lap. Captain Elias stood near the door. Rowan remained across from her. Between them rested the rusted key taken from the cord around her neck. You entered a royal quarantine zone, Rowan said. You concealed the location of 3 missing princes. You stole food from the royal kitchens and ignored a sealed order carrying my crest. Alara looked at the key. Yes. No excuses. No begging. Her calmness disturbed him. You understand those crimes carry a death sentence. Yes. And still you returned every night. They were hungry. Rowan's jaw hardened. That does not answer why you told no one. I did. The words came quietly. Rowan leaned forward. Who? Master Pell, the kitchen steward. I told him I heard children behind the old ash wall. What did he say? He told me the western wing was empty. And when you insisted? He told me servants who repeated cursed stories sometimes disappeared from the payroll. Elias shifted near the door. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Did you tell a guard? The first night. Name him. Alara hesitated. Why protect him? I'm not. Then answer. Guard Owen Mercer. Elias knew the name. Rowan saw it in the captain's expression. What did Mercer do? Rowan asked. He looked at the plague seal. Then he looked at me. Alara rubbed one thumb against her palm. He said nothing living was inside. But you entered anyway. I heard scratching. That could have been rats. It could have been. Rowan waited. Alara finally raised her eyes. Then I heard a child trying not to cry. The room seemed colder. Rowan remembered Oliver's thin arms around her neck. He remembered Julian standing on shaking legs. He remembered 3 empty bowls scraped clean. What happened when you returned the following night? The guards saw me crossing the ash room. And they allowed it? They laughed. Alara's expression changed slightly, touched by tired disbelief rather than anger. One asked whether I was feeding ghosts. What did you say? That ghosts complained less than the living. Elias almost coughed to hide the sound that escaped him. Rowan did not smile, but something in the room loosened for half a heartbeat. Then the questions returned. How did you open the passage? Alara nodded toward the rusted key. My grandmother worked in the Old Moon nursery before I was born. She kept that key after the rooms were closed. That key should have been surrendered. She died with 3 blankets, 2 cooking pots, and the key. The crown never asked for any of them. There was no bitterness in her voice. Only fact. Rowan looked down at the small piece of metal. A forgotten servant had carried access to a royal nursery for decades, and no official inventory had noticed. His kingdom recorded swords, horses, taxes, and noble bloodlines. It had failed to count one old woman's key. How long have the children been there? I don't know. What did they tell you? Very little. Did Julian mention the man with the ring before tonight? Once. Rowan's attention sharpened. What did he say? That the man brought bitter milk. That he told the guards not to answer if the little one cried. Why did you not report that? Alara's composure finally cracked. To whom? The question was soft, but it struck like an open hand. To the guard who laughed? To the steward who threatened me? To the council whose seal was on the door? You could have sent word to me. You were at war. Royal messengers leave Stormhold every day. And who reads their messages before they leave? Rowan became silent. The First Counselor's office controlled royal correspondence during military campaigns. Lord Marius Vane had held that authority for 11 years. Alara looked away. I wrote one message, she admitted. I left it with the tower clerk. What happened? The next morning, someone had searched my room. The note was on my pillow. A warning. No written threat had been necessary. Rowan rose from the table. Elias followed him into the corridor, closing the door behind them. My king, the captain said carefully, her story could be prepared. It could. She may have had help. She almost certainly did, whether she knows it or not. What are your orders? Rowan looked toward the western wing. Oliver's crying had stopped. He did not need to ask why. Alara had been gone for less than an hour, and already the children were waiting for her return. Bring Owen Mercer to me quietly, Rowan said. Not through the guard command. You will find him yourself. Elias nodded. And the woman? Rowan thought of Julian standing between them. She returns to the nursery. Elias looked surprised. Under guard? 2 men, chosen by you. When Alara entered the nursery again, Oliver ran toward her on unsteady legs. She dropped to her knees and caught him before he fell. Theo remained near the fire. Julian stood beside the wall, watching Rowan with a seriousness no 7-year-old should have possessed. Rowan stayed at the doorway. For several minutes, no one spoke. Alara settled Oliver beneath her cloak and checked the child's breathing. Theo brought her an empty bowl as though she had been gone for days instead of an hour. You came back, he whispered. I said I would. Julian looked toward Rowan. She keeps promises. The meaning was impossible to miss. Footsteps approached from the outer corridor. Lord Marius Vane entered the nursery, wearing a dark council robe. A polished black ring rested on his right hand, carved into the shape of winding thorns. Julian went completely still. Rowan saw it. Marius stopped just inside the doorway. His eyes moved first to the children, then to Alara, and finally to the king. My deepest relief, Your Majesty, he said smoothly. We feared the princes had been taken beyond the border. Rowan watched his face. Marius did not ask whether they were hurt. He did not ask whether they had eaten. He did not ask how 3 royal children had been hidden beneath the palace. Instead, his gaze settled on Julian. How much did the eldest tell you? Silence fell across the nursery. Marius seemed to recognize his mistake 1 heartbeat too late. Rowan's expression did not change. Captain Ward, he said calmly. Elias stepped forward. Send a rider to Moonwater Abbey. Not through the messenger tower. Choose someone who has never served the council. Marius's fingers tightened around the black thorn ring. Rowan saw that too. For the first time since entering the Forgotten Nursery, he no longer wondered whether Alara Wynne was hiding something from him. He wondered how many people beside his throne had been lying while his sons starved beneath their feet. Marius remained beneath the doorway with one hand resting over his ring. For a single heartbeat, no one moved. The fire cracked softly behind Alara. Oliver remained wrapped in her cloak. Theo held an empty wooden bowl against his chest, while Julian stared at the first counselor with a fear too old for a child's face. Rowan saw every detail. He saw how Julian's breathing changed. He saw the boy's claws press into his palms. Most of all, he saw Marius notice the child's fear and deliberately look away. Captain Ward, Rowan repeated, his voice calm. Send the rider. Elias bowed. At once, my king. Marius stepped aside as the captain left, but the polished ease had vanished from his expression. Surely that is unnecessary, he said. Moonwater Abbey has sent daily reports. Then the rider will confirm them. The roads are dangerous. So are lies. The words fell quietly between them. Marius lowered his head with practiced respect. Of course. Rowan watched him leave the nursery. The councilman's pace remained controlled until he crossed the outer threshold. Then, his steps quickened. That small change told Rowan more than any confession might have. He turned toward the guards. No one enters this wing without my permission. Not a healer, not a counselor, not even the Queen's ghost. The men bowed quickly. Theo looked toward the doorway after Marius disappeared. That was him, he whispered. Julian grabbed his brother's arm. Don't. Rowan approached slowly, keeping his hands where the children could see them. The man with the ring? Theo nodded before Julian could stop him. He brought the bitter milk. Julian's face hardened. You said not to tell. I said not to tell them. Theo glanced at Rowan, apparently uncertain whether a father who had arrived with a sword belonged among the safe people or the dangerous ones. Rowan lowered himself to one knee. The movement felt strangely difficult. Kings did not kneel often. Fathers should have. I will not force either of you to speak, he said, but no one will bring you bitter milk again. Julian searched his face. You didn't know? The question carried a small, painful hope. Rowan could have defended himself. He could have spoken of war, forged reports, closed borders, and thousands of lives waiting for his commands. None of it belonged in front of the boy. No, Rowan answered. I should have. Julian looked down. Elara said nothing. Yet Rowan felt the truth of his failure more sharply beneath her silence than he would have beneath accusation. Outside, dawn slowly reached Stormhold. Light passed through the narrow nursery windows, revealing faded moons painted across the walls. The room looked less frightening in daylight, but the children did not relax. Every sound from the corridor made Theo flinch. Every turning key caused Julian to move closer to his brothers. Rowan remained until all three had eaten again. He did not ask Elara to leave. Near midday, Captain Elias returned with a gray-haired woman wearing the plain green coat of a village healer. This is Maribel, he said. She served the northern settlements during the Red Winter. She has no connection to the royal medical household. End quote. The healer bowed. Rowan looked at the children. No chains, he warned. No silver instruments. If they ask you to stop, you stop. Mara's eyes softened. That is how children should be examined, Your Majesty. Elara hid the faintest smile. The independent healer began with Oliver. She sat on the floor rather than asking him to climb onto a table. She warmed her hands near the fire and allowed him to inspect each instrument before she touched him. Even then, Oliver refused to leave Elara's lap. Mara did not object. She listened to his heart, checked his eyes, and examined the pale marks beneath his tongue. Her expression slowly changed. Has he been given sleeping herbs? Only what was already in the milk, Elara said. What did it smell like? Bitter flowers, damp metal, a little like crushed pine bark. Mara looked toward Rowan. Silverroot. The word entered the room like a blade. Rowan's wolf stirred beneath his skin. What does it do? In small doses, it weakens a young wolf's scent and delays shifting. It causes exhaustion, confusion, and loss of appetite. Mara touched one of the faint burns around Julian's wrist. Combined with royal silver, it can keep even a strong-blooded pup from transforming fully. Julian pulled his hand away. Mara immediately leaned back. I'm sorry, she said. The boy stared at her, surprised by the apology. The royal healers had apparently never offered one. Rowan's voice became colder. Can it kill them? Yes. Theo pressed closer to Elara. But that does not seem to have been the goal, Mara continued. The doses were measured. Enough to keep them weak. Not enough to end their lives quickly. Why? I cannot answer that. Rowan could. Someone needed the princes alive, helpless, and hidden. The realization settled inside him like winter ice. Mara examined all three children. None showed signs of moon fever. None carried an infectious illness. They were starving, dehydrated, and affected by repeated silverroot exposure, but they could recover. Slow meals, Mara instructed. Warm fluids, no sudden physical strain, and familiar faces nearby. Her gaze moved toward Elara. She is helping them more than any medicine could. Rowan studied the young Omega. She sat with Oliver against her heart while Theo leaned against her shoulder. Julian remained close enough to touch the edge of her skirt, though he pretended the position was accidental. The royal physicians reported that the princes were violent, Rowan said. Alara glanced at the three thin children. Were they? Mara's mouth tightened. Frightened animals bite the hand that traps them. Frightened children are not so different. A low huff came from the doorway. Bran, Rowan's enormous werewolf, had entered without anyone noticing. The guards immediately stepped aside. The black wolf carried scars from a dozen battles. He had torn armored men from horses and once guarded Rowan's wounded body for 2 nights without allowing even allied soldiers to approach. Now he walked directly toward Alara. Theo's eyes widened. Is he going to eat her? Rowan folded his arms. He is considering it. Alara gave him a flat look. That is deeply reassuring. Bran stopped in front of her. His golden eyes studied Oliver, then Theo, and finally Julian. The children went still. Alara did not reach for him. She simply waited. Bran lowered his massive head and smelled the empty bowls beside her. Then, with a slow sigh, he lay down across her feet. Theo blinked. He chose her too. Julian looked toward Rowan. For the first time, the oldest prince's mouth almost curved into a smile. Your wolf has better judgment than your guards. Captain Elias coughed into one fist. Rowan looked at his son for a long moment. Apparently, something changed inside the nursery. It was not trust, not yet. But fear loosened its grip for one brief breath. That fragile peace ended before sunset. The rider Rowan had sent to Moonwater Abbey returned with blood on his cloak and snow in his hair. He had changed horses twice and ridden without rest. Rowan met him in a small chamber beside the nursery. Elias stood at his right. Alara remained near the open door where the children could still see her. The rider dropped to one knee. Your Majesty, the Abbey never received the princes. Although Rowan expected the answer, hearing it spoken aloud struck him hard. Never? The abbot swore before the moon shrine. No royal children have entered their gates this year. The rider removed a leather tube from beneath his cloak. They received letters claiming the princes would arrive. Then another message ordered the monks to report that the children were recovering, whether they arrived or not. Did they obey? No. They sent questions to Stormhold. Rowan's eyes shifted toward Elias. No questions reached me. The rider handed him several folded pages. Each carried the royal seal. At first glance, the mark looked perfect. Then Rowan noticed one line inside the wolf crest turned inward instead of outward. A copied seal. A careful imitation made by someone close enough to study the original. The Abbey also sent this, the writer said. It was the death record of Brother Alwyn, the healer whose signature appeared on several recent reports. The man had been dead for 4 months. Silence covered the chamber. Rowan folded the document with deliberate care. Captain, lock the messenger tower. Elias nodded. And the council? Let them believe I still trust the reports. Alara looked at him. You want the liar to keep lying. I want to see where he carries the next one. For the first time, Rowan saw approval in her eyes. It mattered more than it should have. A guard appeared at the door. My king, we found something in the ash room. He placed a small piece of hardened wax on the table. It was dark blue, nearly black around the burned edges. Elias picked it up. Council wax. Who has access to it? Alara asked. The first counselor and his personal clerks. Rowan closed his fingers around the fragment. A forged Abbey report. A dead healer's signature. Silver root in the children's blood. Blue wax hidden near the passage Alara had used. The pieces were no longer scattered. They had begun forming a road. A soft scraping sound came from the nursery. Rowan returned to find Julian kneeling beside the cold fireplace. The boy had drawn something in the gray ash with one finger, a circle of black thorns. At its center, he had drawn a narrow letter, V. Rowan's heartbeat slowed. Julian, he said carefully, where did you see that symbol? The child looked toward the hallway, making certain no counselor stood there. Then he whispered, on the ring. House Vane. Marius had served beside Rowan's father. He had taught Rowan the laws of the council, negotiated his earliest treaties, and stood behind him on the day the crown was placed upon his head. He had also controlled the palace while Rowan was at war. Rowan slowly knelt beside Julian. Did the man with the ring tell you his name? Julian shook his head. Did anyone else call him something? The boy looked toward Theo, then toward Oliver, who slept against Alara's chest near the fire. No. Rowan kept his voice gentle. What did he say when he came here? Julian's shoulders tightened. The change was immediate. His eyes no longer saw the nursery around him. They saw another night, another shadow standing beyond the locked door. Alara noticed it too. That is enough for now, she said. Rowan glanced at her. I need to know what happened. And he needs to know he can stop. The words were quiet, but there was steel beneath them. Rowan's first instinct was to remind her who held authority in the room. Then he saw Julian's claws pressing into his own palms. Blood had begun to gather beneath the boy's nails. Rowan lowered his voice. You may stop whenever you wish. Julian looked at him cautiously. No one will punish you? No. What if I remember wrong? Then you remember wrong. What if it was someone important? Rowan's chest tightened. Then he should have behaved better. Theo gave a small, surprised snort. Julian looked at his younger brother, and some of the terror left his face. Alara moved closer, but did not touch him. Tell us only what feels safe, she said. Julian stared into the ashes. He came after the loud bell. The fire bell? Rowan asked. The boy nodded. There was smoke in our old room. Men carried us down the stairs. They said the palace was burning. Rowan remembered the report. A fire had broken out in the royal nursery 4 days after he left Stormhold. Marius had written that the princes were moved immediately to Moonwater Abbey. No bodies had been found. No one had questioned that because everyone believed the children had escaped. Were you taken outside? Rowan asked. Julian shook his head. They covered our faces. We went down. Down where? I don't know. There were stairs. Theo cried because it was dark. I did not, Theo said quickly. Julian looked at him. You bit my sleeve. That was different. A faint warmth entered the room. Small but welcome. Rowan let it remain for a moment before asking, what happened after you came here? The Blackring man told the guards we were sick. He said father could not see us. Julian looked up. He said you chose the war. Rowan could not answer. The truth was more complicated, but to a frightened 7-year-old, the difference meant little. Rowan had left. Someone else had filled the silence with poison. What else did he say? Alara asked. Julian's brow tightened as he searched his memory. He told the woman with the bitter milk to keep us quiet. Healer Sabine? Rowan asked. Julian did not recognize the name. The woman had gray hair, Theo said. And she smelled like wet leaves. Maribel looked up sharply. Moonshade can smell like wet leaves when boiled. Rowan turned toward her. Silverroot and moonshade together? Not for the children, Mara said. That mixture would be too dangerous. But the scents might have come from the same medicine room. Rowan thought of Luna Celeste. Her illness had begun with exhaustion, fever, confusion, and a weakness no healer could explain. Sabine Mar had supervised every treatment. He pushed the thought aside before anger ruined the fragile trust Julian had offered. Did the man with the ring ever mention why you were kept alive? Julian's breathing grew shallow. Alara raised one hand. Rowan stopped. For several seconds, the room held only the soft sound of Oliver sleeping. Then Julian spoke without being asked again. He said we had to stay alive until the dark moon. Rowan felt Elias move behind him. The next lunar eclipse would arrive in 6 nights. What happens at the dark moon? Theo asked. No one answered. The crown vault rested below the western wing. Ancient law claimed its deepest chamber could only be opened when the living heirs of House Ashford marked its 3 seals during an eclipse. The ritual had not been used for more than a century. Most people believed it was only a legend. Marius knew it was not. Rowan stood slowly. We are finished for today. Julian looked relieved, but he did not smile. As Rowan turned away, the boy caught the edge of his sleeve. The touch was so light Rowan almost missed it. I heard Mother arguing with him once. Julian whispered. Rowan stopped breathing. With the man who wore the ring? Julian nodded. What did she say? The boy closed his eyes. She said, the children are not keys. The words struck Rowan harder than any weapon. Celeste had known. Perhaps not everything, but enough to understand that someone intended to use their sons. Later that afternoon, Alara opened the nursery windows for the first time in weeks. Cold air entered, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. Theo complained until she wrapped him in 2 blankets and placed him near the fire. Oliver followed her everywhere, one hand holding the edge of her skirt. Julian remained quiet but no longer watched every doorway. Rowan ordered the children moved to the royal chambers. All 3 refused. "This room has one entrance we know," Julian explained. "The other rooms have too many." Rowan wanted to tell him the royal chambers were protected by 50 guards. Then, he remembered the guards who had stood outside this nursery while the children starved. Numbers no longer meant safety. "Then we stay here," Rowan said. Theo blinked. "We?" Rowan looked around the ruined room. "For now." Alara raised one eyebrow. "Your Majesty, this room has no proper fire, no fresh bedding, and a roof that complains every time the wind changes. I have slept in worse places." "Did those places have 3 recovering children?" Rowan looked at the broken fireplace. "I can repair a fire." Alara did not appear convinced. 10 minutes later, the nursery had filled with smoke. Theo coughed dramatically beneath his blanket. Julian opened the window wider. Oliver buried his face in Alara's shoulder. Rowan knelt before the fireplace, staring at the stubborn pile of damp wood as though it had insulted his bloodline. Alara crossed her arms. "You command armies? Usually they are less stubborn than fireplaces. Have you considered asking the wood politely?" Rowan looked over his shoulder. "Does that work?" "No, but it might improve your manners." Captain Elias turned away to hide a smile. Even Julian laughed. It was a small sound, rough from disuse, but it stopped every adult in the room. Julian seemed startled by it too. Then Theo laughed because Julian had laughed. Oliver joined them without understanding why. For one brief moment, the forgotten nursery sounded like a place where children lived rather than waited to disappear. Rowan lowered his head, pretending to adjust the wood. He did not want anyone to see what that sound had done to him. Alara eventually rebuilt the fire herself. She showed Rowan how to leave space between the logs and how to open the lower vent. "You smothered it," she said. "I gave it fuel. You gave it no room to breathe." The answer silenced him. His gaze moved toward his sons. He had provided guards, walls, tutors, and royal healers. He had given them everything except room to speak and a father willing to listen. The fire finally caught. Golden light spread across the nursery walls, revealing old paintings hidden beneath soot. Small wolves chased silver moons across the stones. Theo climbed onto one of the dusty beds and found a wooden carving beneath the mattress. It was shaped like a wolf pup with one broken ear. "Look," he said. Rowan recognized it immediately. Celeste had carved the toy while pregnant with Julian. She had been terrible with knives and too proud to ask the palace carpenter for help. The uneven little wolf had sat near her bed for years. Rowan took it carefully. A faint line ran along its back. "That opens," Alara said. Rowan examined the carving. The wood had been fitted so neatly that the seam nearly disappeared. He pressed the broken ear. Rowan. A narrow panel sprang loose. Inside rested a strip of folded paper. The writing was Celeste's. Rowan knew the shape of every letter. He had received notes from her during battles, warnings during council meetings, and once an entire page complaining that he had taught Julian to howl indoors. His hands became unsteady. The paper did not contain a message. It contained a recipe: 12 sacks of winter grain, 8 jars of pine honey, 5 barrels of lamp oil, 3 measures of salt. Alara leaned closer. "This is not a recipe." "It looks like one," Elias said. "No kitchen would use these amounts together." She took the paper carefully, keeping it where Rowan could see. Her eyes moved across the symbols written beside each item. "These are storage marks. Kitchen workers use them when goods arrive without proper labels." Rowan pointed to a crescent beside the grain. "What does that mean?" "Transferred after midnight." "And the cross spoon?" "Removed without entering the public ledger." Elias stepped nearer. "Can you read the full list?" Alara nodded slowly. "The numbers are not quantities. They are warehouse sections." She spread the paper on the table. Winter grain from section 12. Honey from section 8. Lamp oil from section 5. Salt from section 3. And Rowan understood. Coordinates. To something stored in the lower granary, Alara said. Elias's expression hardened. The lower granary was closed after the winter shortages. Thousands of villagers had gone hungry that year. Marius had blamed damaged roads and failed harvests. Celeste had never believed him. At the bottom of the paper, beneath the false recipe, she had written one sentence. Rowan read it aloud. V knows I found the second ledger. The nursery seemed to grow colder despite the fire. A dark stain marked the inside of the hidden compartment. Not ink. Dried blood. Celeste must have hidden the message while injured or dying. A knock sounded outside the nursery. One of Elias's guards entered. My king, Lord Vane requests an emergency council session. He says the discovery of the princes must be announced before rumors cause panic. Rowan folded Celeste's paper and placed it inside his coat. No announcement. The guard hesitated. My king? Tell Lord Vane the children remember nothing. Julian looked up sharply. Rowan met his son's eyes. It was the first lie he had told since entering the nursery. But this one was not meant to hide the truth from his children. It was meant to protect the truth long enough to expose the man who feared it. Captain, Rowan said after the guard left. Take 2 people you would trust with your own family. Search the lower granary. Elias bowed. And if we find the second ledger, bring it to me. What if someone is already waiting for us? Rowan's eyes moved toward the blackthorn symbol still visible in the ashes. Then do not let him know you found it. Across the palace, a servant entered Marius's private chamber and whispered that the king had dismissed Julian's drawing as the imagination of a frightened child. Marius relaxed. Only slightly. Then the servant added that smoke had been seen rising from the old moon nursery. A fire had been lit in the forgotten room. Marius looked down at the blackthorn ring on his hand. For 10 months, the nursery had remained cold. Now Rowan Ashford was sitting beside his sons. And somewhere inside that room, Luna Celeste might still be speaking from the grave. The lower granary had been sealed since the winter famine. Official records claimed the foundation was unstable. A council order warned that the eastern wall could collapse without warning. No servant was permitted to enter. No guard was assigned to the corridor. That alone made Captain Elias suspicious. Dangerous places inside Stormhold were usually guarded to keep people out. This one had simply been forgotten. Shortly after midnight, Elias led Rowan and Alara down a narrow staircase beneath the royal kitchens. They carried no torches bearing the king's crest. Only one covered lantern guided them through the damp stone passage. Alara walked behind Rowan with Luna Celeste's false recipe folded inside her sleeve. The deeper they traveled, the colder the air became. You should have remained with the children, Rowan said quietly. Alara knows the storage symbols, Elias reminded him. I was speaking to her. And I heard you, Alara replied. Rowan glanced over his shoulder. You are not a soldier. No. If someone is waiting below, then it is fortunate I brought a soldier and a king. Elias lowered his face, hiding what might have been a smile. Rowan did not answer. The 3 continued until they reached an iron gate covered in rust. A council seal hung from the chain, but the wax had been replaced recently. Alara touched it with one finger. This is less than a month old. Elias examined the lock. Someone still comes here. He removed a thin metal tool from his belt. The lock opened after several careful movements. Beyond the gate, rows of empty storage rooms stretched beneath the palace. Broken crates lined the walls. Rats moved somewhere in the darkness. Rowan remembered the winter these rooms had supposedly run dry. Families had stood outside Stormhold for hours, begging for grain. Mothers had watered soup until it carried no taste. Children had slept beside cold fireplaces because the palace claimed there was no lamp oil left to distribute. Marius had blamed ruined bridges and frozen roads. Rowan had believed him. He had ordered soldiers to share their rations. He had opened the public treasury. It had not been enough. 300 people died before spring. Alara stopped beside a stone arch marked with the number 12. Winter grain, she whispered. The room appeared empty. Elias lifted the lantern. Dust covered the floor, but a narrow section near the back wall had been disturbed. Rowan crossed the room and pushed against the stones. Nothing moved. Alara studied Celeste's note again. Transferred after midnight, she murmured. The crescent mark may not only describe the time. She looked upward. A small moon had been carved into one of the stones. Rowan pressed it. A hidden latch released. Part of the wall swung inward, revealing a chamber packed with crates. Not old, empty crates. Sealed ones. Elias cut open the nearest lid. Inside lay bags of grain stamped with the royal wolf crest. The next crate held lamp oil. Another contained dried meat, medicine, and winter blankets. Alara stared into the chamber. They had enough. Her voice was barely audible. Rowan understood what she meant. The kingdom had possessed enough supplies to save those families. Someone had chosen not to. Elias opened another crate and pulled out a rough cloak bearing the symbol of a rival border pack. These supplies were sent north, he said. To the raiders. Rowan's hands curled into fists. During the past year, rival wolves had attacked isolated villages, burned bridges, and forced Rowan's army into one campaign after another. His enemies had been fed with white pine grain, armed with white pine steel, kept warm beneath white pine blankets, while white pine children froze. Alara walked deeper into the hidden room. She found a small writing desk behind the crates. Its drawers had been emptied, but scratches on the floor showed it had been moved repeatedly. "Help me," she said. Rowan and Elias shifted the desk aside. A loose stone rested beneath it. Rowan lifted the stone and found a leather book wrapped in oilcloth, the second ledger. Elias opened it beneath the lantern. Every missing shipment was recorded. Dates, quantities, secret routes, payments to border captains, bribes made to palace officials. Even the false repair costs used to hide the movement of royal wagons. Beside each transaction appeared the same mark, M.V. Rowan read page after page in silence. Marius had not merely stolen from the kingdom. He had created the very wars Rowan had spent years fighting. "He kept you away," Alara said. Rowan looked at her. "He starved villages, supplied raiders, and forced you to defend the borders. Every battle made the council more necessary. Every absence gave him more control here. And every victory made me trust the reports more," Rowan said. His voice had become dangerously calm. Elias turned another page. A list of payments appeared beneath the heading Royal Medical Household. One name had been written repeatedly, Sabine Mar. Beside it were purchases of silverroot and another herb. Moonshade. Alara leaned closer. "My grandmother warned me about that." Rowan looked at her sharply. "What does it do?" "In small amounts, it causes weakness and fever. In repeated doses, it affects memory and heartbeat." Alara's face paled. "It can resemble moon heart sickness." The room disappeared around Rowan. He saw Celeste lying beneath white blankets, her dark hair damp with sweat, her hands shaking so badly she could no longer hold a cup, her eyes becoming unfocused, while Sabine insisted the illness had entered its final stage. He remembered asking whether poison was possible. Marius had stood at the foot of the bed and said every royal medicine had been examined. Rowan had believed him. He had held Celeste's hand as she struggled to breathe. He had listened while she tried to say something about the children. He thought the fever had confused her. Perhaps she had been trying to warn him. A wooden shelf broke beneath Rowan's fist. Crates shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Elias stepped back. "My king." Rowan struck the shelf again. The ancient wood split down the center. "He stood beside her," Rowan said. "He watched her die." His wolf surged beneath his skin. Claws broke through his fingertips. His vision sharpened until he could see every grain of dust drifting in the lantern light. "He comforted my sons at her funeral." Rowan. Alara's voice reached him, but the rage was louder. He seized the edge of the desk and overturned it. The crash echoed through the granary. Then a child cried somewhere above them. "Oliver." The sound traveled faintly through the stone ventilation shaft. Rowan froze. Another frightened cry followed. He looked at his hands. Blood covered his knuckles. His claws remained extended. His breathing sounded almost animal. For a terrible second, he imagined Julian seeing him that way. A father transformed by anger. A king who could destroy a room but had not noticed his children disappearing beneath it. Rowan forced his claws back. "We have the ledger," Elias said carefully. "We should leave." Rowan nodded, but his body would not move. Alara picked up the overturned lantern. Fortunately, its flame remained covered. She did not tell him to calm down. She did not say Celeste was in a better place. She did not offer forgiveness that was not hers to give. She simply stood near him until he could breathe again. When they returned to the nursery, Oliver was awake in Julian's arms. Theo sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket. Both older boys watched the door with frightened eyes. The moment Alara entered, Oliver reached for her. Rowan remained behind. He could not make himself cross the threshold. Alara took Oliver and whispered until his crying softened. She checked his forehead, then settled all three children near the repaired fireplace. Only after they slept did she find Rowan sitting outside the nursery. He had removed his crown before entering the western wing. Without it, he looked less like the ruler feared across the northern territories and more like a tired man who had discovered the cost of his own blindness. Alara sat beside him on the stone floor. For a long while, neither spoke. The palace was quiet around them. At last, Rowan said, "She warned me." Alara looked toward him. "Celeste tried to tell me something before she died. She kept saying the children were not safe. I thought the fever had confused her. You trusted the people treating her. I trusted the people killing her." His voice broke on the final word. Rowan lowered his head. "I promised her I would protect them. You can still keep that promise." I was gone. Yes. I believed reports instead of looking at my own sons. Yes. He turned toward her, pain hardening his expression. "You do not soften the truth. No one helped me by softening it when my brother died." Rowan remembered what she had told him the winter hunger, the closed gates, the child she could not save. "I protected everything she left me," he whispered. "Her kingdom, her throne, her laws." Inside the nursery, Oliver shifted in his sleep. Rowan looked through the open doorway. Accept what mattered. Alara's expression softened, but she did not touch him. Then protect them now. 4 simple words. No absolution. No promise that his sons would forgive him. Only a path forward. Rowan sat in silence, letting those words settle where rage had been. After a while, Alara rose. "Oliver will wake soon. The Silverroot makes his sleep uneven." Rowan looked at the nursery. "What should I do?" "Be there when he opens his eyes." He entered quietly and sat beside the smallest bed. Oliver woke before dawn. His eyes opened in confusion. His small hand reached toward the empty space where Alara usually sat. Then he saw Rowan. The king did not speak. He simply remained. Oliver watched him for several uncertain seconds. "You came back," the child whispered. "Yes." "You go again?" Rowan felt the question beneath the question. Would he choose another battle? Another report? Another locked door? Not tonight. Oliver considered the answer, then pushed one corner of his blanket toward Rowan. It was not forgiveness, but it was an invitation to stay. Across Stormhold, Maria stood inside Alara's small servant room while 2 council guards searched her belongings. They found patched dresses, dried herbs, an old recipe book, and 3 wooden spoons carved with the prince's initials. Nothing useful. Marius's jaw tightened. The king searched the lower granary. One guard reported. "Did he find anything?" "We do not know." Marius looked toward the narrow bed. If Rowan possessed the second ledger, accusation alone would no longer be enough. The king would need a more immediate enemy, someone close to the princes, someone without rank or allies. Someone the council could condemn before she was allowed to speak. Marius removed a small leather pouch from inside his robe. Silverroot filled the bottom. Beside it lay a royal nursery key, stamped with Rowan's crest. He handed both objects to the guard. "Put them beneath her mattress." The man hesitated. "She saved the princes." Marius's eyes became cold. "She found what was never meant to be found." The guard lowered his head and obeyed. Marius walked to the door, then stopped. "Call an emergency council session at sunrise. Tell them the king has brought an unknown Omega into the royal nursery. And if his majesty refuses to surrender her..." Marius turned the blackthorn ring slowly around his finger. "Then we will remind the kingdom what happens when a grieving king allows a poisoner near his children." Behind him, the pouch of Silverroot disappeared beneath Alara's bed. And while Rowan sat beside his waking son for the first time in months, the trap meant to destroy the woman who had saved them was already being closed. Morning reached Stormhold beneath a sky the color of old steel. Before the first kitchen bell rang, 12 council members had gathered inside the Hall of Judgment. Servants lit the wall torches in silence. Guards stood beneath the carved stone wolves with their hands resting on their swords. At the center of the chamber waited a narrow wooden table. Upon it lay a pouch of silverroot, a royal nursery key, and one of Alara's patched kitchen aprons. Marius stood beside the evidence with his blackthorn ring resting against the tabletop. Rowan entered without a crown. Captain Elias walked at his right. Alara followed several steps behind them, guarded but unchained. She wore the same plain gray dress she had slept in. A small flower stain remained near one sleeve. Several nobles looked at her as if poverty itself had entered the room. Marius bowed. "My king, I regret that this matter could not remain private." "You called the council before sunrise," Rowan said. "Privacy was clearly not your concern." A few councillors lowered their eyes. Marius did not react. "My concern is the safety of the royal heirs." Alara looked toward the silverroot. She recognized the leather pouch immediately, not because it belonged to her, because it did not. Marius lifted it carefully. This was found beneath the woman's mattress. A murmur moved through the hall. "The same substance discovered in the prince's blood," he continued. Beside it was a key bearing the royal crest, a key capable of opening restricted nursery passages. Rowan's expression remained unreadable. "Who searched her room?" "2 council guards and Steward Pell." "On whose order?" "Mine." "Before asking mine?" Marius paused. The danger required speed. The danger had been hidden beneath this palace for nearly 3 weeks. "You discovered urgency only after I returned." The murmuring stopped. Marius folded his hands. "We must not allow grief to cloud judgment, Your Majesty." Rowan's wolf stirred at the word grief. Marius had used it gently, almost kindly. That made it sharper. The first counselor turned toward the others. "This Omega admits entering a sealed royal wing. She admits stealing food. She concealed the prince's location for 12 nights. She possessed a key no servant should have owned." "The key around her neck belonged to her grandmother," Elias said. Marius touched the royal key on the table. "I am not referring to that one." Alara stared at the polished silver object. Rowan noticed the confusion in her face. "You have never seen it?" he asked. "No." Marius sighed. Of course she would say that. Alara looked at him for the first time. "And of course you searched my room while I was not there." A counselor shifted uncomfortably. Marius's gaze cooled. "You stand accused of poisoning the heirs to the throne." "I fed them." "You fed them after weakening them." Theo's empty bowls flashed through Rowan's mind. Alara tasting the broth first. Julian dividing his portion. Oliver drinking slowly from her hand. Marius continued before Rowan could speak. "She created their suffering, then presented herself as their salvation. It is an old method of manipulation." "She had no way to know I would return early," Rowan said. "She may not have expected you to. Perhaps she intended to remove the princes once they trusted her. Through a bread chute?" A few council members looked away. Marius's mouth tightened. "The method matters less than the result. Your sons cling to her. They reject royal authority." The eldest growled at his own father to protect a stranger. The words landed exactly where Marius intended. Rowan felt every eye turn toward him. This was no longer only an accusation against Alara. It was an accusation that Rowan's judgment had been weakened by shame, that a grieving king had allowed an unknown Omega to take control of his children. Alara seemed to understand it too. She looked at Rowan without pleading. That made the decision harder. If he dismissed the evidence immediately, Marius would tell the kingdom that the Alpha King had abandoned law for emotion. The counselors who still doubted Marius might turn against Rowan before Elias finished gathering proof. But if Rowan imprisoned Alara, even briefly, he would place her in the hands of the same palace that had ignored 3 starving children. Marius leaned closer to the table. "Until a full inquiry is completed, she must be confined." Rowan looked around the hall. Some counselors appeared eager. Others were afraid. None asked why the silverroot pouch looked newly filled. None asked how a low-born kitchen worker could have obtained a royal key. They wanted a simple enemy. Alara was standing close enough to blame. Rowan's voice became cold. Alara Wynn will be held in the Eastern Guard chamber under Captain Ward's authority. Marius's satisfaction appeared for less than a second. Alara's face did not change. Only her fingers tightened against her skirt. No council guard will approach her, Rowan continued. No questioning will occur without me present. The evidence remains here under royal seal. Marius bowed. A wise precaution. Rowan looked directly at him. I have not decided who the precaution is protecting. The first counselor's smile faded. Two of Elias's soldiers stepped beside Alara. She turned toward Rowan. You said no one would hurt me. Her voice was low enough that only those nearest could hear. No one will. That is not the same as believing me. Rowan had no answer that would not sound empty. Alara glanced toward the evidence. The pouch is not mine. The key is not mine. But you already knew that. I know what I have seen, Rowan said. And yet I am still the one being locked away. Pain entered her eyes, but it never became weakness. Do what you must, Your Majesty. The title sounded colder than it had before. She walked from the hall without resistance. Rowan watched the doors close behind her. For the first time since finding his sons, he wondered whether caution and cowardice sometimes wore the same face. The princes learned of Alara's confinement before Rowan returned to the nursery. He heard Julian shouting from the corridor. When Rowan entered, the oldest boy stood near the fireplace with his small fists clenched. Theo had dragged Alara's cloak from the chair and wrapped it around Oliver. Bring her back, Julian demanded. Rowan dismissed the guards with one look. She is safe. That's what they said about us. The words stopped him. Theo stared from beneath the blanket. Did she do something wrong? There is evidence that must be examined. Did you see her put it there? Julian asked. No. Did I? No. Did Theo? No. Then the evidence did not see anything either. Rowan looked at his 7-year-old son. Julian's voice shook, but the logic did not. She gave us food, Theo said. The bitter woman gave us milk. Rowan lowered himself beside them. Alara is being guarded by men I trust. Julian's expression hardened. You trusted the council. The accusation was deserved. Rowan did not defend himself. I made mistakes. You're making another one. Oliver began to whimper. He clutched Alara's cloak against his face, searching for her scent. Rowan reached toward him. The child moved away. She comes at food time, Oliver whispered. She will come back. You said? Rowan understood the question. Was this another promise delivered by an adult who would disappear? Yes, he said. I said. Julian looked toward the nursery door. Then keep it. Before Rowan could respond, footsteps approached. Royal healer Sabine Mar entered carrying a silver tray. Her gray hair had been tied beneath a white covering. Steam rose from 3 bowls of warm milk. Captain Elias followed her. I ordered no royal healer inside this wing, Rowan said. Sabine bowed deeply. The council requested a second medical assessment. The council does not command this nursery. Marius appeared behind her. No one wishes to challenge you, my king. But after the discovery in the Omega's room, surely the children must be tested for further poisoning. Julian moved in front of his brothers. No milk. Sabine's hands trembled against the tray. It is only warm milk, young prince. No. Theo tightened Alara's cloak around Oliver. Marius spoke gently. The healer is here to help. Oliver lifted his head. The moment Sabine stepped closer, his entire body went rigid. His eyes widened. A broken sound escaped his throat. No bitter. Sabine stopped. Rowan looked at the bowls. What is in them? Goat's milk, honey, a sleeping herb to ease their recovery. What herb? Valerian. Maribel entered from the adjoining room. She smelled the air and frowned. That is not valerian. Sabine's face lost color. Oliver kicked beneath the cloak. No. His foot struck the tray. One bowl overturned. Milk spilled across the stone floor and splashed over Sabine's glove. A bitter scent rose with the steam. Wet leaves, crushed pine, silverroot. Rowan seized Sabine's wrist before she could pull away. Her pulse raced beneath his fingers. He brought the glove closer and smelled it. The scent was unmistakable. The same smell clung faintly to Julian's restraints. The same smell Alara had described. Marius stepped forward. Perhaps the bowl was contaminated in the kitchen. Ilara's kitchen. Another convenient accusation. Mara dipped one finger into the milk, then touched it to a testing stone from her satchel. The pale surface darkened blue. Silver root, she said. Theo backed against the wall. Julian's claws emerged. Sabine began to cry. I did not prepare the tray. Who did? Rowan asked. A council attendant brought the mixture to my medical room. Name him. I don't know. Marius's voice sharpened. This proves nothing about the woman's innocence. If anything, it suggests she has accomplices. Rowan released Sabine's wrist. A small piece of dark material floated in the spilled milk near his boot. Elias bent and picked it up. Wax. The warm liquid had softened its edges, revealing a deep blue center. Council wax. The same color found in the ash room. Rowan slowly raised his eyes toward Marius. The first counselor showed no fear, only disappointment, as if the world had failed to follow the story he had written for it. Captain, Rowan said. Elias stood straighter. Seal the royal medical rooms. Detain every attendant who handled this tray. And Healer Mar? Sabine shook so badly she could barely stand. Keep her under guard. Marius opened his mouth. Rowan's alpha power filled the room before he could speak. The torches bent beneath the force of it. You will say nothing more until I ask you. Marius lowered his head. But the blackthorn ring on his hand turned slowly beneath his thumb. A nervous habit. A crack in the mask. Rowan faced Julian. Stay here with Captain Ward's chosen guards. The boy looked toward the overturned bowl. Where are you going? To keep my promise. The Eastern Guard chamber stood at the end of a quiet corridor away from the council wing. Rowan walked there with Elias beside him and 2 soldiers behind them. His pace quickened with every step. The silver root in Alara's room had been planted. The royal key had been planted. The same person had tried to place poisoned milk before his sons while the council watched. Someone was no longer hiding evidence. Someone was destroying it. Elias reached the chamber first. The guard outside lay unconscious near the wall. There was no blood, only a dark bruise behind his ear. Rowan tore open the door. The room was empty. A broken chair rested beneath the narrow window. One of Alara's guards lay on the floor, breathing but unmoving. The second had vanished. A length of rope remained on the table. Alara had not been tied when she entered. Someone had come for her afterward. Rowan crossed the room and found a small smear of blood near the door. Beside it lay one of Alara's wooden spoons. The handle had been carved with the letter O. Oliver. Elias examined the corridor. There is a laundry passage behind the eastern wall. Rowan's claws emerged. She did not escape. No, she was taken. From somewhere deep inside Stormhold, a warning bell began to ring. Once. Twice. Then the nursery alarm joined it. A guard came running around the corner, his face white with fear. My king. Rowan turned. The man struggled to breathe. The princes, someone tried to enter the western wing. Rowan looked at the blood on the floor, then at the spoon Alara had dropped behind her. The trap had never been designed merely to imprison her. It had been designed to remove the one person his sons trusted before Marius made his next move. And this time, Rowan no longer intended to wait for the council to give him permission to protect his own family. The nursery alarm echoed through Stormhold like the howl of a wounded wolf. Rowan ran. He did not wait for Elias to summon more guards. He did not slow when servants scattered from the corridor ahead. The Alpha King crossed the western wing with his claws already drawn, carrying Alara's blood-stained wooden spoon in one hand. The doors to the Old Moon Nursery stood open. One of the royal guards lay face down beside the threshold. Another leaned against the wall, pressing both hands to a wound beneath his ribs. Inside, the 3 princes were still alive. Julian stood before the fireplace with a broken chair leg clutched like a spear. Theo crouched behind him, holding Oliver beneath Alara's gray cloak. Bran filled the center of the room, his black fur raised and his teeth bared toward the open passage. Rowan entered. Julian swung the wooden weapon toward him before recognizing his father. Where is she? There was no greeting, no relief, only terror. Someone took Alara, Rowan said. Oliver began crying. The smallest prince pushed free of Theo and ran toward the door. Alara. Rowan caught him before he reached the corridor. Oliver fought with surprising strength. His little fist struck Rowan's chest while he screamed Alara's name. She is not there, Rowan said, trying to hold him without trapping him. I am going to find her. You locked her. The accusation came from Julian. Rowan looked over Oliver's head. His eldest son stood shaking, still gripping the broken chair leg. Yes, Rowan said. The admission quieted the room. I placed her under guard. I believed it would keep her safe. It didn't. No. You believed the wrong people again. Each word landed where it belonged. Rowan could have explained that he had needed time, that the council had been waiting for him to appear unstable, that openly ignoring the evidence might have divided the pack before he could prove Marius's guilt. None of those reasons changed what had happened. Alara had trusted him enough to remain in Stormhold. He had rewarded that trust with another locked door. I was wrong, Rowan said. Julian stared at him as though waiting for an excuse. None came. Rowan lowered Oliver to the floor. The child immediately wrapped himself in Alara's cloak. I will bring her back, Rowan promised. Julian's expression hardened. You promised before. Rowan felt the truth of that sentence more deeply than the boy understood. A king's promise meant nothing if the people nearest him survived only because someone else had disobeyed his laws. He turned toward Elias. Lock this wing from the inside. Bran stays with the children. No one enters unless you recognize him personally. Elias glanced toward the injured guards. I should go with you. You will protect my sons. My king. That is not a lesser duty. Elias understood. He bowed once. Rowan looked at Julian. I need you to stay here. No, Julian. If the Black Ring man comes back, Bran will stop him. The great wolf released a low growl, as though confirming the promise. Julian looked toward the animal. Then, he looked at Rowan. Bring her back first. I will. This time, Rowan did not ask his son to trust the words. He intended to make them true. Rowan returned to the eastern corridor with 6 soldiers chosen by Elias. The unconscious guards had been moved aside. The blood near the empty chamber remained untouched. Alara's spoon had fallen beside the entrance to the laundry passage, its handle pointing toward the wall. Rowan pressed his palm against the stones. A faint draft moved between them. Before he could search for the latch, hurried footsteps sounded from the opposite end of the corridor. A young guard appeared with both hands raised. Owen Mercer. His face was pale. Sweat darkened his uniform despite the cold. He carried a leather book beneath one arm. 2 royal soldiers drew their swords. Owen stopped. Your Majesty, I need to speak. Where is she? Rowan asked. Owen swallowed. I don't know exactly. Rowan crossed the distance between them before the man could blink. His hand closed around Owen's throat and drove him against the stone. Then choose your next words carefully. Owen's boots scraped the floor. The laundry tunnels, he choked. They took her through the laundry tunnels. Who? Council guards, men assigned to Lord Vane. Rowan's claws touched the skin beneath Owen's jaw. You watched them? I followed. But you did not stop them. There were 4. You carry a sword. They said they had orders to execute her if anyone interfered. And you believed them? Owen's eyes filled with shame. No. I was afraid. The answer was so simple that it cut through Rowan's rage. Afraid. The guards outside the nursery had been afraid. The servants who ignored the crying had been afraid. Sabine had been afraid. Fear had traveled through Stormhold like an invisible chain, binding good people until evil no longer needed many loyal followers. It needed only enough frightened witnesses. Rowan released him. Owen fell to his knees, coughing. The passage opens behind the old linen shelves, he said. They were heading toward the lower washing rooms. He held out the leather book. This is the real Western Guard ledger. One soldier took it and passed it to Rowan. Pages had been filled with names, dates, and entry times. Several entries showed Marius's personal guards entering the quarantined wing after midnight. Beside each visit appeared the same authorization mark. Black thorns surrounding the letter V. Other entries had been crossed out and replaced in different ink. Rowan turned to the final pages. Owen's name appeared beside nearly every night Alara had entered. You saw her 12 times, Rowan said. Owen lowered his head. Yes. You heard the children? On the 4th night, and still you said nothing. Owen's voice became unsteady. Lord Vane knew my mother was living in the palace infirmary. He said she would lose her room if I questioned the quarantine order. She cannot walk. Winter would kill her. So, you let children starve instead. The guard flinched. Yes. No explanation. No request for mercy. Only the truth. Rowan looked at the ledger again. Why speak now? Because I saw them take Alara. That did not frighten you? It did. Then why follow? Owen stared at his hands. She looked at me when they dragged her past. She did not ask me to save her. His voice broke. She told me to warn the king that they would go after the boys next. Even while being taken, Alara had thought first of the princes. Owen continued. I have spent weeks telling myself I was protecting my mother. But every night that woman crossed the ash room carrying food, I knew she was doing what I should have done. He raised his eyes. I cannot change the nights I stayed silent. Tell me where to stand now. Rowan studied him. You will lead us through the laundry passage. Owen nodded. And if this is another trap, Rowan continued, Marius will not have time to punish you. I understand. The laundry tunnel descended beneath the eastern wing in a series of tight stone turns. Water dripped from rusted pipes. Broken baskets and torn sheets had been abandoned along the walls. The passage had once allowed servants to move linens without entering noble corridors. Now, it offered Marius a road through the palace no royal patrol watched. Rowan followed the faint smell of Alara's blood. At the first crossing, they found one of her shoes. At the second, a torn piece of gray fabric clung to an iron hook. She had left a trail. Not because she expected rescue to arrive by chance. Because she understood someone would search. A muffled sound came from ahead. Rowan raised one hand. The soldiers stopped. He heard breathing behind a wooden door. More than one person. Owen pointed toward a second path. That room connects to the lower washing chamber. Rowan signaled 2 soldiers around the side passage. Then, he kicked the door open. A council guard turned in surprise. Rowan struck him before the man could reach his weapon. The force threw him against the wall. A second guard rushed from behind a stone basin. Owen blocked his blade with his own sword. Metal rang through the chamber. The third man stood beside Alara. She had been tied to a chair with her arms pulled behind her. Blood marked one side of her face. A strip of cloth covered her mouth. The guard pressed a knife against her throat. Another step, and she dies. Rowan stopped. His wolf demanded blood. Alara met his eyes. She did not look frightened for herself. She moved her gaze toward the floor. A bucket of steaming wash water rested beside the guard's leg. Rowan understood. You will release her, he said. The man's grip tightened. Lord Vane said you would choose the Omega over the kingdom. The kingdom is not standing behind that knife. Rowan took one slow step. The guard shifted. Alara kicked the bucket. Boiling water struck the man's boots. He shouted and pulled away. Rowan crossed the chamber before the knife touched her skin. His hand closed around the guard's wrist. Bone snapped. The knife fell. Rowan drove the man to the floor and stopped only when Alara made a sound behind the cloth. He turned. She was watching him, not the guard. Him. Rowan forced his claws back. He cut the ropes around her wrists and removed the gag. Alara drew one painful breath. The boys? Safe in the nursery. Her eyes closed briefly. Then she looked at Owen, who stood over the second defeated guard. You finally picked a side. Owen lowered his head. I should have done it sooner. Yes. The word carried neither cruelty nor comfort, only consequence. Rowan helped Alara stand. She swayed and gripped the edge of the chair. You are hurt. My dignity suffered terribly. Blood ran from a cut near her temple. Rowan looked at the room filled with wet sheets and harsh soap. The next time I order you guarded, I will choose somewhere that does not smell like boiled socks. Alara stared at him. There will be a next time? No. Despite everything, the faintest breath of laughter escaped her. It disappeared just as quickly. The men spoke while they moved me, she said. Marius knows the eclipse begins tonight. We found evidence that he needs the princes alive for the crown vault. He will not leave them in the nursery. Elias is with them. Marius controlled the guard rotations. He may have prepared another entrance. Rowan felt the danger before the next bell rang. Not the general palace alarm. The western nursery bell. 3 short strikes. Then silence. They ran back to the western wing. Smoke drifted through the corridor. Not fire. Powder from a shattered sleepstone filled the air. 2 guards lay unconscious near the nursery entrance. Elias knelt beside the wall. One hand pressed to his bleeding head. Bran stood over him, staggering. The great wolf tried to rise when Rowan approached, but his legs failed. Alara, Elias said hoarsely. They used silver dust. She dropped beside Bran and checked his breathing. Where are the children? Rowan demanded. Elias looked toward the open nursery. They came through the old fireplace passage. We stopped 3. There were more beneath the floor. Rowan entered the room. The blankets had been thrown aside. The 3 beds were empty. One overturned bowl rolled slowly across the stone until it struck his boot. Alara stood behind him. For a moment, she made no sound. Then she noticed a small object near the fireplace. A wooden spoon. The handle carried the letter O. Oliver's spoon. A narrow smear of blood crossed the floor beside it. Alara picked it up with shaking fingers. He left this. Or dropped it, Owen said. No. She pointed toward the handle. A small piece of red thread had been tied around it. The thread came from Theo's blanket. Theo tied this on purpose. I taught them to leave something familiar if they were ever moved again. Rowan followed the blood marks to the back of the fireplace. The stone panel stood open. Beyond it, steep stairs disappeared beneath Stormhold. Toward the crown vault, Elias forced himself to his feet. How much time until the eclipse? Owen looked through the narrow western window. The moon had already begun to rise beyond the mountains. A dark shadow touched its silver edge. Less than an hour. Far below them, something heavy moved beneath the palace. Ancient mechanisms groaned inside the rock. The first locks of the crown vault were awakening. Then a child's scream traveled faintly up the hidden stairway. Julian, don't touch my brothers. Alara stepped toward the darkness. Rowan caught her arm. You are injured. So are they. There may be 20 armed men below. Then it is fortunate I brought a king. They had exchanged those words in the lower granary only hours earlier. This time Rowan did not argue. He drew his sword. Alara held Oliver's spoon against her heart. Together, they descended toward the crown vault, while the shadow continued swallowing the moon. The stairs beneath the old moon nursery had not been used in generations. Dust covered every step. Ancient roots had broken through the stone walls, twisting around rusted torch brackets and forgotten royal symbols. The passage descended so steeply that Rowan had to keep one hand against the wall to steady himself. Alara followed close behind. Her injured ankle slowed her, but she never complained. Oliver's wooden spoon remained clenched in her hand. The small red thread Theo had tied around its handle moved with every breath she took. Behind them came Elias, Owen, and 6 royal soldiers. Bran remained above with the wounded guards. Every man in the passage knew that some of Stormhold's defenses no longer belonged to the king. The darkness made that truth feel heavier. A deep vibration traveled through the stone. Ancient locks were opening below. Rowan stopped at the next landing. 2 paths split before them. One continued downward through a wide royal arch. The other narrowed into a low service tunnel, barely tall enough for a man to stand. Elias examined the floor. Boot marks on the main path. A trap, Alara said. She pointed to the walls beneath the royal arch. Those holes are too evenly placed. Owen leaned closer, then quickly stepped back. Arrow channels. If we cross the threshold, someone below releases the mechanism, Elias said. We would never reach the second stair. Rowan turned toward the service tunnel. Where does that lead? Alara lifted the wooden spoon toward the faded kitchen mark carved near the entrance. Old supply route. The nursery staff used it during sieges. How do you know? My grandmother marked the same symbol in her recipe book. Elias glanced into the narrow darkness. It may no longer be safe. Neither is the obvious road, Alara replied. Rowan stepped toward the tunnel. Elias caught his arm. My king, the men need orders before we divide. Rowan looked at the soldiers behind him. Some wore the wolf crest of the royal guard. Others had served under captains chosen by Marius. In the weak lantern light, loyalty and betrayal wore the same uniform. The Alpha King drew his sword. The sound of steel against leather filled the passage. "Listen carefully," Rowan said. Every soldier became still. Lord Marius Vane no longer speaks with the authority of the crown. Any command carrying his seal is void. Any man who prevents us from reaching the princes will be treated as an enemy of White Pine. One guard shifted uneasily. Rowan continued, "Elara Wynn is under my direct protection." The words carried the force of an alpha decree. The lantern flames bent. The soldiers lowered their heads. No counselor will question her. No guard will restrain her. No noble title will be placed above her safety until my sons are returned. Elara stared at him. Rowan looked directly into her eyes. This order is not temporary. Something moved across her face, but she did not thank him. Not yet. One of the younger guards stepped forward. "My king, the council will say the Omega has influenced your judgment." Rowan's gaze hardened. The council watched 3 children starve beneath their feet. "I am no longer interested in what they call judgment." Silence followed. Then Owen drew his sword and placed it across his chest. "I stand with the king." Elias did the same. One by one, the 6 soldiers followed. Rowan turned toward the service tunnel. "Elias, take 3 men through the royal arch, but do not cross the marked threshold. Make enough noise to convince the guards below that we are attempting the main path." "You want them looking upward," Elias said, "while we enter behind them." Elias nodded. "Owen goes with you." Owen looked surprised. Rowan did not. "You know Marius's guard rotations. Prove you are finished hiding behind them." "I will." Rowan faced Elara. "You stay between us." She shook her head. "I know the kitchen marks. You can direct us from the center. I can move faster in that passage than any armored man. You are bleeding, and your sons are below us." Their eyes held. Rowan knew that expression now. Elara was not challenging him for pride. She was measuring the safest way to reach the children. He stepped aside. "Lead." It was the first time the Alpha King had given the path to someone the palace had never considered worth following. The service route twisted through the mountain in complete darkness. The ceiling lowered until Rowan had to bend. His shoulders scraped against damp stone. Somewhere beneath their feet, water moved through underground channels. Elara counted the kitchen marks carved into the walls. "Grain," she whispered at the first turn. "Water at the second. Cold storage at the third." Rowan watched the way she moved. She did not hesitate because she was fearless. He could hear the slight unevenness in her breathing. He saw how tightly she held Oliver's spoon. She was afraid. She simply refused to let fear decide where she stopped. After several minutes, the sounds of men reached them through the stone. Marius's guards were moving along the main passage. Elias had begun the distraction. A shout echoed. Then metal struck metal. Elara quickened her pace. Rowan caught her elbow as her injured ankle gave way. She pulled free immediately. "I can walk." "I did not say you couldn't. You were about to carry me." "I was considering it. You would become stuck before the next turn." Despite the danger, Rowan almost smiled. "Your faith in me is moving. My understanding of your shoulders is practical." The tunnel opened slightly. Elara stopped. Ahead, a pale blue light shone through a crack in the wall. They had reached the outer chamber of the crown vault. Through the narrow gap, they could see the chamber below. 3 circular platforms had been carved into black stone. At the center of each stood a silver seal marked with the Ashford wolf. Julian had been forced onto the first platform. His wrists were bound. Blood marked one palm. Theo and Oliver stood near the remaining seals, held by council guards. Oliver was crying for Elara. Theo kept repeating, "She is coming." Marius stood between the platforms wearing ceremonial council robes. His blackthorn ring reflected the blue light rising from the floor. Beside him waited Sabine Mar. Her face looked pale and hollow. She held a silver bowl and several bandages, but her hands shook too badly to remain still. Another man stood near the entrance. Dorian Vane. Marius's only son wore battle armor beneath a dark cloak. Rowan had known him since childhood, Dorian had trained with Frostfang warriors and sworn loyalty before the royal throne. Now nearly 40 armed men waited behind him. Not council guards. Rebel soldiers. Alara's hand tightened around the spoon. That is the army he bought. With our grain, Rowan said. With the kingdom's hunger. Marius approached Julian. The first seal requires only a few drops. Julian stepped backward until the guard behind him tightened the chain. My father will kill you. Marius smiled. Your father is still arguing with the council upstairs. He found us. And lost you again. Julian's face changed. The words struck the boy exactly where Marius intended. Alara moved toward the hidden opening. Rowan stopped her. Not yet. He is hurting him. I know. Then why are we waiting? Because if we enter now, the guards kill Theo and Oliver before I cross the chamber. Alara looked again. He was right. Each child had a blade held close to his back. Dorian's archers stood along the upper ledges. The room had been arranged to punish any direct attack. Rowan leaned near her ear. There is another exit beside the third seal. Can you reach it through the supply route? And Alara studied the faded symbols on the wall. Possibly. I can draw their attention. You mean you can walk into a room full of armed traitors? Yes. That is not a plan. It is a description of bad judgment. I need them looking at me. And what do you need me to do? Reach the boys. Do not move until Marius believes he controls the room. Alara turned toward him. And if he cuts Julian again? Rowan's jaw tightened. Then I trust Julian to endure long enough for us to end this. He is 7. I know. Pain moved behind Rowan's eyes. I know exactly how old he is now. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Alara asked, Why should I trust you? The question was not cruel. That made it harder. Rowan looked toward the chamber, where his sons waited beneath drawn blades. You should not trust me because I am king. Alara remained silent. You should not trust me because I made a promise. I have broken too many by being absent. He lowered his voice. Trust that I finally understand what hesitation costs. Her gaze moved over his face. I locked you away when you needed me to stand beside you. I allowed men with titles to make your truth look smaller than their evidence. I will not ask you to forget that. What are you asking? Help me bring them home. The blue light beneath the seals grew brighter. Alara looked down at Oliver's spoon. Bring them home first, she said. Rowan nodded. And after? After, you can decide whether I deserve another conversation. She raised her eyes. That may take a long time. Then I will wait a long time. A horn sounded in the main passage. Elias's distraction was ending. There was no more time. Rowan moved toward the hidden door. Alara caught his sleeve. Do not let anger choose for you. He looked back. Marius wants you furious. Furious men miss the hand near the knife. Rowan understood. She was not asking him to spare Marius. She was asking him to see the whole room. I will remember. The wall opened with a low scrape. Rowan stepped into the crown vault alone. Every weapon in the chamber turned toward him. Marius froze beside Julian. Dorian drew his sword. The rebel soldiers shifted into formation, filling the spaces between the 3 seals. Rowan walked forward without raising his blade. His boots struck the black stone with slow, measured steps. Father, Theo shouted. Oliver reached toward him. Julian lifted his head. For the first time since the nursery, hope appeared openly in the boy's face. Marius recovered quickly. My king, he said, you should not have come without your army. I did not come for the throne. Rowan's eyes moved toward his sons. I came for them. Dorian laughed. They are the throne. No, Rowan said. That is what men like you never understood. Marius rested one hand on Julian's shoulder. The boy flinched. You stand in a difficult position, Rowan. Move closer, and the youngest dies first. Rowan stopped. His wolf pressed against his skin, demanding that he tear through every man between them. He remembered Alara's warning. Furious men miss the hand near the knife. He studied the chamber. Theo's guard held his weapon too high. Oliver's captor was watching Rowan instead of the tunnel behind him. Sabine stood near a rack of ceremonial instruments, her lips moving soundlessly. She was counting, perhaps the eclipse, perhaps the seconds until she chose a side. You created the border wars, Rowan said. Marius smiled faintly. You found the ledger. You starved White Pine villages and fed the raiders. I gave the kingdom an enemy. You gave yourself power. Power is what keeps kingdoms alive. No, people keep kingdoms alive. Marius's gaze moved toward Julian. Your wife said something similar. Every muscle in Rowan's body tightened. Marius saw it and continued. Celeste had a sentimental weakness for servants, farmers, hungry children. She believed compassion could replace order. You poisoned her. Sabine closed her eyes. Dorian looked toward his father. Marius showed no surprise. She discovered matters beyond her understanding. She understood you. She understood too late. Julian stared at Marius. You killed Mother? The question was small. Marius did not answer him. That silence became an answer of its own. Julian's face crumpled for only a heartbeat. Then he looked toward Rowan. Rowan wanted to cross the chamber. He forced himself to remain still. Not yet. Marius lifted Julian's injured hand over the first seal. The old laws require the blood of every living heir. Once the vault opens, the council will control enough gold to end your reign before sunrise. Dorian will call himself regent, Rowan said. Dorian raised his chin. The realm needs a ruler who does not kneel before kitchen servants. Rowan's expression remained calm. A ruler who serves a thief is already kneeling. Anger flashed across Dorian's face. Good. The attention of the rebel soldiers shifted toward Rowan. Behind the third platform, a shadow moved near the supply door. Elara. She had reached the chamber. Oliver saw her. His entire face changed. Elara. The smallest prince twisted violently in the guard's arms. The man tightened his hold. Marius turned. One heartbeat. That was all Rowan needed. He threw his sword. The blade struck the chain binding Julian to the platform. Silver links shattered across the stone. At the same moment, Elara stepped from the shadows. She did not rush the guards. She did not shout. She knelt several yards behind Oliver and placed the wooden spoon on the floor. Ollie, she called softly. The child stopped fighting. His tear-filled eyes fixed on her. Remember the dark room? Oliver nodded. You found me every time. Another nod. Find me now. The guard pulled him backward. Oliver dropped his full weight, slipping beneath the man's arm. He hit the floor, crawled between two soldiers, and ran toward Elara. A rebel guard reached for him. Theo bit the hand holding his collar. The man shouted. Julian threw himself against Theo's captor. The chamber exploded into movement. Rowan shifted fully. His wolf tore through his skin in a burst of black fur and silver eyes. The force of his transformation knocked two guards from their feet. Elias and the loyal soldiers charged through the main passage. Steel met steel. Marius seized Julian by the hair and dragged the boy toward the first seal. Complete it, he shouted at Sabine. The healer lifted the silver bowl. Her hands stopped trembling. No. Marius stared at her. Sabine dropped the bowl. It struck the stone and rolled away. You will obey me. You said they would not suffer. They are heirs. Suffering is the first duty of royal blood. Sabine stepped back. No. It is the first lie men like you teach them. Dorian raised his sword toward her. Before he could strike, Rowan's wolf hit him from the side. They crashed across the black floor. Elara caught Oliver and pulled Theo behind her. Julian remained trapped near Marius. The first seal began to glow. Marius had pressed the boy's bleeding palm against it. Ancient runes awakened around the chamber. The mountain shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Far above them, bells began ringing across Stormhold. Marius smiled through the chaos. One seal, he said. Two more, and your kingdom belongs to me. The first seal burned beneath Julian's bleeding hand. Blue light spread through the crown vault in thin, violent lines. Ancient symbols awakened across the black floor, running beneath the soldiers' boots like cracks filled with moonlight. The entire mountain groaned around them. Marius held Julian against his chest, one arm locked beneath the boy's throat. A narrow ceremonial blade rested against the prince's skin. Two more seals, Marius said, his voice rising above the battle. Then every gate, every army, and every council seat in White Pine will answer to me. Rowan stood across the chamber with blood running from his shoulder. His sword lay several yards away. Between them, loyal guards fought the rebels beneath flashing steel. Elias held the main entrance while Owen protected Sabine near the shattered silver bowl. Dorian had dragged himself behind one of the stone pillars, one hand pressed against the deep wound Rowan's wolf had torn across his side. Alara remained near the third platform with Oliver in her arms and Theo behind her. She could feel the smallest prince shaking against her chest. Theo's fingers clutched the back of her dress. Julian was still alone. "Let him go," Rowan said. Marius smiled. "You have said that to too many enemies in your life, Rowan. It has never worked. This is not a negotiation. No, it is an education." Marius pressed the knife closer to Julian's neck. The boy winced but made no sound. "You spent years believing a kingdom was protected at its borders," Marius continued. "Meanwhile, I controlled its food, its messages, its healers, and its frightened little servants. You won every battle I gave you, and returned weaker each time." Rowan's wolf pushed against his skin. The urge to cross the chamber and tear Marius apart was almost unbearable. Then Rowan saw Julian watching him. Not Marius. Him. The child's golden eyes carried a silent question. Would his father become another dangerous man with blood on his hands? Or would he finally see what the boy needed? Alara's warning returned. Angry men missed the hand near the knife. Rowan forced his claws back. Marius noticed. "Still pretending to be civilized? I am remembering that my son is watching." Julian's eyes widened slightly. Marius's smile weakened. For the first time, he looked less certain. Alara lowered Oliver carefully to the floor. "Stay behind me," she whispered. Oliver caught her sleeve. "No, go. I'm not leaving you." She sat on the black stone instead of standing. The battle continued around them, but Alara turned her attention toward the three children as though they were once again inside the forgotten nursery. She placed Oliver's wooden spoon on the floor. Then she removed two more objects from her pocket. A piece of red thread. A smooth kitchen stone Theo liked to carry. She arranged them in a small row. Three familiar things. Three frightened princes. "Theo," she said softly. The 5-year-old looked at her. "Do you remember the first bowl you ate?" He nodded. "You said it needed more salt." It did. Despite the chaos, Theo's mouth trembled. Alara continued. "Do you remember what Julian did?" "He gave me half." "And what did you do?" Theo looked toward his older brother. "I saved some for Ollie. That is how you survived. Not because anyone ordered you, because you protected one another." Marius shouted toward the rebel guards. "Take the younger two." 3 men broke away from the fighting and rushed across the chamber. Alara did not run. She looked at Oliver. "Find Theo." The smallest prince reached for his brother. Theo grabbed him and pulled him behind the third seal. The first guard reached Alara. She threw a handful of silverroot powder from the shattered bowl into his eyes. He screamed and stumbled backward. The second guard raised his sword. Owen struck him from the side before the blade fell. Steel rang through the chamber. "Go," Owen shouted. Alara did not flee toward safety. She moved toward Julian. Marius saw her coming. "You," he said. There was more hatred in that one word than in every accusation he had spoken before the council. Alara stopped several yards away. She carried no weapon. Only the wooden spoon remained in her hand. "You should have stayed in the kitchen," Marius said. "You should have stayed out of the nursery." The answer was quiet. It angered him more than a shout would have. "You believe feeding 3 children made you important?" "No." "Then what do you believe?" "That it made them less hungry." For a moment, even the battle seemed to soften around her words. Marius stared at her as if compassion were a language he had never understood. "You risked your life for children who did not know your name. They learned it. You broke royal law. The law was outside the door. The children were inside." Marius's grip tightened around Julian. "You have poisoned them against their father." Julian spoke before Alara could answer. She brought him back. Marius looked down. The boy's voice shook, but he continued. "She didn't tell us to trust him. He came back himself." Something broke across Marius's expression. His control depended on people believing every relationship could be manipulated through fear. Julian's words denied him that power. Marius dragged the boy toward the second platform. If the youngest heirs will not cooperate, the eldest will bleed enough for all three. Sabine stepped forward. That will not open the vault. Marius turned toward her. The royal healer's face was pale, but her hands were steady now. The seals require willing contact from each living heir, she said. You knew that. You told me fear would be sufficient. I lead. Dorian looked up from behind the pillar. Father. Marius's eyes burned. You altered the translation? Sabine reached inside her robe and removed a folded parchment. Luna Celeste discovered the original ritual. She made me copy it before you poisoned her. Rowan's gaze fixed on the page. Sabine's voice broke. I was afraid to give it to you. Marius controlled the medical household. He held my son's debt and threatened to send him to the border prisons. You helped him poison Celeste, Rowan said. Sabine lowered her head. Yes, the admission carried no excuse. I told myself I was protecting my child, then I helped him destroy yours. Marius pulled Julian closer. Give me the parchment. No, your son still lives because I allow it. Sabine looked directly at him. My son sent word this morning. Captain Ward cleared his debt after finding the second ledger. Elias blocked another rebel strike near the entrance. You are out of hostages, Marius. The first counselor's face twisted. He raised the ceremonial blade. Rowan moved. He crossed the chamber faster than any human eye could follow. Marius slashed toward Julian's throat. Rowan caught the blade in his bare hand. Silver cut through his palm. Blood poured between his fingers, but he did not release it. Marius tried to pull back. Rowan held firm. Let go of my son. Alpha power rolled through the vault. The blue flames bent outward. Several rebel soldiers dropped to one knee beneath the force. Marius's arms shook, yet desperation made him dangerous. He released Julian and reached for the dagger hidden beneath his robe. Alara saw it first. Rowan. Julian dropped to the floor. Rowan turned as Marius drove the dagger forward. The blade struck Rowan beneath the ribs. A collective cry rose through the chamber. Rowan staggered. Marius smiled. Then Rowan closed one blood-covered hand around his wrist. You still miss the hand near the knife, Marius whispered. No, Rowan said. His eyes shifted past him. I saw my son move. Julian had crawled behind Marius. The boy seized the chain connected to the first counselor's ceremonial robes and pulled with both hands. Marius lost his balance. Rowan struck him across the face. The first counselor fell beside the glowing seal. The knife slid across the floor. Julian scrambled toward Alara. Marius reached for the boy's ankle. A sound rose from Julian's chest. Not a frightened growl. A full wolf's howl. Golden light swept across his small body. His bones shifted. His hands became paws. Dark silver fur covered his arms and shoulders. For the first time since the poisoning began, the eldest prince completed his transformation. The young wolf stood between Marius and Alara. His body was still thin. His legs trembled. But his eyes were bright. Alive. Marius froze. You cannot shift. Julian bared his teeth. Alara rested one hand near his shoulder without restraining him. He can now. The young prince lunged when Marius reached for another weapon. Julian did not tear out his throat. He seized the blackthorn sleeve and pinned it to the floor. Rowan moved beside him and kicked the hidden blade away. Father and son stood over the man who had tried to destroy them both. Across the vault, Theo pulled Oliver behind one of the pillars as the remaining rebels began to surrender. Elias disarmed Dorian. Owen forced two council guards to their knees. The fight was ending. Marius looked up at Rowan. Blood ran from his mouth. Kill me, he said. Rowan's wolf wanted exactly that. He remembered Celeste struggling for breath. He remembered starving villagers. He remembered Oliver's thin arms, Theo's terror, and silver burns around Julian's wrists. One movement would end Marius. No court. No testimony. No chance for the man to poison another room with his voice. Rowan raised his claws. Julian returned to human form beside him. The boy looked at his father. Are you going to kill him? The chamber went silent. Rowan saw what Marius wanted. If the king executed him in rage before his children, Every future account could claim Rowan had killed the only man capable of explaining the evidence. Dorian's supporters would call it revenge. The frightened council would divide. Marius might die, but the system he created would survive behind unanswered questions. More importantly, Julian would remember his father standing over a helpless man and choosing blood. Rowan lowered his hand. No. Marius laughed weakly. Mercy? Justice. Rowan seized him by the front of his robes. You will stand before the people whose food you stole. You will hear the names of every child who died during the winter famine. You will answer for Celeste, for my sons, and for every soldier sent to fight a war you purchased. He tore the black thorn ring from Marius's finger. And when the kingdom knows exactly what you are, you will live long enough to watch us rebuild everything you tried to break. Elias approached with silver restraints. Marius's expression changed at last. Death had not frightened him. Being exposed did. Being remembered as small, greedy, and defeated frightened him more. Elias locked the restraints around his wrists. The first seal continued glowing. Ancient stones shifted beneath the chamber. The vault, Owen warned. Sabine ran toward the center platform. The ritual was interrupted after activation. If the seals remain open, the chamber may collapse. How do we close it? Rowan asked. Sabine unfolded Celeste's parchment. All three heirs must reject the claim willingly. Theo appeared from behind the pillar. What do we say? Sabine looked at the old words. Place your hands near the seals and say that no crown may use your blood without your will. Theo frowned. That is a lot. Alara knelt beside him. You can use your own words. The three princes moved toward the platforms. Julian stood at the first seal. Theo took the second. Oliver approached the third, while holding Alara's hand. The blue light trembled beneath them. Julian placed his palm near the first symbol. My blood is mine. The seal dimmed slightly. Theo looked at the second. You can't have us. More light disappeared. Oliver stared at the third seal. He did not understand crowns, ancient laws, or royal rituals. He understood locked rooms. He understood bitter milk. He understood the woman who always came when he cried. He pressed one small hand against the stone. No take. The third seal went dark. A deep sound moved through the mountain. The ancient doors stopped opening. Then they closed. One by one, the glowing lines vanished beneath the floor. The crown vault locked itself. Not through Rowan's strength. Through the choices of three children Marius had believed were nothing more than keys. Later, the vault smelled of blood, dust, and extinguished magic. The wounded were carried into the upper halls. Rebel soldiers were placed under guard. Dorian was taken away beside his father, his face empty beneath the weight of defeat. Sabine gave Maribel the antidote formula for silverroot poisoning. She also surrendered Celeste's final letter and every medical record she had hidden. Then she held out her hands for restraints. Rowan looked at her. You helped save them tonight. I helped place them there. Her voice was tired. Do not confuse one act of courage with innocence. Rowan signaled the guards. She was taken into custody without resistance. Alara sat on the lower step with all three princes around her. Theo had fallen asleep against one shoulder. Oliver rested in her lap. Julian remained awake beside her, wrapped in Rowan's cloak after his first full shift. Rowan stood several feet away. The dagger wound beneath his ribs had been bandaged, but each breath still hurt. He did not approach until Julian looked toward him. Is he gone? The boy asked. Marius is under guard. Will he come back? No. Julian watched his father for a long moment. You didn't kill him. No. Did you want to? Rowan could have lied. Yes. Why didn't you? Because you deserved justice more than I wanted revenge. Julian considered the answer. Then he shifted slightly, making room on the stone step. The invitation was small. Rowan accepted it. He sat beside his sons and the woman who had kept them alive. No one spoke for a while. Oliver woke when Rowan adjusted his injured side. The little boy blinked sleepily. His gaze traveled from Alara to Rowan. You hurt? A little. Oliver reached out and touched the bandage with 2 fingers. Then he looked toward the stairs where the prisoners had been taken. Badman gone? Yes. Oliver leaned back against Alara. His eyes began to close again. You stay this time? Rowan felt every broken promise gather inside that question. He looked at Julian, who had learned to defend his brothers before he learned to trust his father. He looked at Theo, who had saved food while starving. He looked at Oliver, who still expected every warm person to disappear. Then he looked at Alara. She did not answer for him. She waited, just as she had waited beside 3 bowls in the darkness. Rowan placed his hand on the cold stone between himself and his children. I stay. Oliver's small fingers moved over the floor and closed around one of his. The gesture was uncertain, but it remained. Above them, the eclipse began to pass. Moonlight returned to White Pine one narrow silver edge at a time. And deep beneath the palace, the Alpha King finally understood that saving a kingdom was not one great victory won before thousands of witnesses. Sometimes it was simply remaining beside the people who had every reason to believe you would leave. 3 months after the eclipse, every bell in Stormhold rang at sunrise. The sound traveled beyond the palace walls, across the snow-covered roofs of the capital, and into the frozen valleys of White Pine. Farmers left their barns. Merchants stepped from their shops. Families gathered near public message boards while royal riders carried the same announcement to the distant packs. Marius Vane had been found guilty of treason. The trial had lasted 12 days. Rowan ordered the doors of the Great Hall left open throughout the proceedings. No council veil hid the testimony. No private agreement softened the charges. Citizens who had lost children during the winter famine sat in the same chamber as nobles who had once praised Marius for his careful leadership. The second ledger was read aloud. Every stolen grain shipment was named. Every payment to the border raiders was recorded. Every false medical report, forged abbey letter, and secret order carrying the Blackthorn seal was placed before the people. Sabine testified without asking for mercy. She described how Luna Celeste had discovered moonshade among the palace medicines. She admitted altering the prince's treatment records and helping Marius hide them beneath the western wing. Owen told the court how fear had kept him silent. Then Julian spoke. The 7-year-old prince stood beside Rowan wearing a dark blue coat that hung slightly loose around his shoulders. He did not describe every night inside the old moon nursery. Rowan refused to make his son relive pain simply to satisfy the court. Julian said only what was necessary. He told us father had chosen the war instead of us, the boy said. He said no one would come when we cried. His eyes moved toward Marius. He was wrong. Marius did not look at him. The former first counselor stood without his council robes, his blackthorn ring, or the polished calm that had once controlled entire rooms. Silver restraints circled his wrists. His face seemed smaller without power surrounding it. Rowan rose when the final judgment was delivered. Marius Vane, he said, you will not be executed. A murmur spread through the hall. Marius lifted his head. For one brief moment, relief appeared in his eyes. Rowan allowed him to feel it. Then the king continued. You will be stripped of your title, lands, family privileges, and every coin acquired through royal service. Your estates will be sold. The money will restore the winter granaries and compensate the families harmed by your crimes. Marius's relief vanished. You will spend the remainder of your life at Blackstone Keep. Each year, on the anniversary of the famine, the names of the dead will be read to you. The hall became completely still. You wanted history to remember you as the man who ruled behind the throne, Rowan said. It will remember you as a thief who starved children because he believed no one important would hear them cry. Marius's face twisted. You think removing me repairs your weakness? No. Rowan's answer surprised him. I repaired nothing by defeating you. I only removed the man who benefited from what I failed to see. The king looked across the hall. My absence gave this betrayal room to grow. My trust in unchecked authority protected lies. I will carry responsibility for that long after Marius Vane is forgotten. Several nobles shifted uneasily. Kings did not confess failure before their people. Rowan no longer cared what kings were expected to do. A throne that cannot admit error will repeat it, he said. White Pine will not. The guards led Marius away. He looked once toward Alara, who stood beside the 3 princes near the front of the hall. Hatred remained in his eyes. Alara did not return it. She turned toward Oliver because he had begun pulling at the formal collar around his neck. It's trying to eat me, the child whispered. It is a collar. It's winning. Alara loosened it while Theo covered a laugh. Marius disappeared through the iron doors without receiving another glance from her. That was his final defeat. He had spent his life believing power meant forcing everyone to look at him. The woman who destroyed his plans had already chosen to look after someone else. Justice did not end with the trial. Rowan dismissed 7 council members who had accepted bribes or deliberately ignored missing records. 2 were imprisoned. 3 lost their titles. The others were required to repay every royal payment they had received during the famine. Sabine was stripped of her position as royal healer. Her cooperation and the antidote she provided saved the princes from lasting damage, but Rowan did not call that innocence. She received a reduced sentence and was assigned to work under supervision in the northern fever settlements after 1 year of confinement. Owen lost his guard rank. He accepted the judgment without protest. Afterward, Rowan offered him a place in a new royal service responsible for protecting the families of palace workers from threats and retaliation. "You are giving me another uniform?" Owen asked. "No," Rowan said. "I am giving you work that will become useless if you do it correctly." Owen almost smiled. Captain Elias rebuilt the royal guard from the ground up. No guard could now be assigned solely through council authority. Every sealed order required 2 independent signatures, and quarantine laws could no longer silence reports involving children or dependent members of the pack. The messenger tower was removed from council control. The winter granaries were opened for public inspection, and beneath the western wing, the Old Moon Nursery changed. The plague seal was destroyed. The iron door was removed. The dark stone walls were washed until the painted moons appeared again. New windows allowed sunlight into the room. The fireplace was repaired by a professional mason after Rowan's second attempt filled the corridor with smoke. Alara had forbidden him from making a third. "You lead armies," she reminded him. "I have improved. You set fire to a curtain. It was an old curtain. It became older very quickly." The princes laughed for nearly 5 minutes. The nursery no longer belonged only to the royal children. Rowan ordered it transformed into a shelter for orphaned pups and children of soldiers killed at the border. Alara supervised the work. She chose warm colors instead of royal silver. She placed low shelves where small hands could reach them. Every bed received a different carved animal so frightened children could recognize their own place without needing to read. Most importantly, no door locked from the outside. When the rebuilding was finished, Rowan summoned Alara to the throne room. She arrived wearing a clean brown dress with flour on one sleeve. Rowan had stopped asking how flour followed her into every room. The 3 princes entered behind her despite being told the meeting was private. Theo climbed onto the lower throne step. Oliver carried 2 wooden spoons. Julian stood beside Alara with a serious expression of a royal advisor. Rowan looked at them. This was meant to be a formal appointment. Theo nodded. "We came to make it less boring." Alara lowered her head to hide a smile. Rowan took a rolled document from the throne table. "Alara Wynne, the crown offers you the title of Lady of the Western House, along with land, household staff, and a permanent position within the royal family." Alara did not reach for the document. "What would I be expected to do?" "Nothing you do not choose." "Then it is a very expensive title for someone doing nothing." Theo nodded approvingly. Rowan looked at her. "You are refusing it." "I am questioning it. In my experience, that is how you begin refusing things." Alara stepped closer to the table. "A noble title would make people bow. It would not guarantee they tell me the truth." "What would?" "Authority to enter every nursery, infirmary, food store, and child shelter in White Pine without council permission." Rowan remained silent. Alara continued. "I want independent workers in every territory. Omegas, widows, retired guards, village healers, people who notice what powerful officials overlook. Their reports must come directly to the crown and to a public record keeper." "You have planned this." "I had 3 months." "You could have asked for a comfortable estate." "I have worked in a palace. Comfort is often where people stop listening." Julian looked proudly toward her. Rowan set aside the noble appointment. What title would serve the work? Alara thought for a moment. "Royal Keeper of the Young." Theo made a face. "It sounds old." "It sounds responsible," Julian said. "It can sound both." Rowan took a fresh sheet of parchment. "Royal Keeper of the Young," he repeated. "Independent authority throughout White Pine. Direct access to the crown. No council may overrule an investigation involving a child's welfare. Alara looked at him carefully. Even if the investigation embarrasses the king? Especially then. Only after that answer did she accept. The appointment was announced the following morning. Some nobles complained that a lowborn Omega had been given authority over royal institutions. Rowan invited each complainant to explain publicly why they feared an inspection. The complaints ended quickly. 6 months after the night of the eclipse, winter began releasing its hold on White Pine. Snow still covered the mountain peaks, but water ran beneath the ice along the palace gardens. Small green shoots appeared near the southern walls. The royal breakfast room had changed too. It had once been a formal chamber where servants placed silver dishes before an empty king. Rowan had eaten there alone whenever council meetings allowed him enough time. Now 4 small wooden bowls waited on the table every morning. One belonged to Julian, one to Theo, one to Oliver. The 4th belonged to Alara. She had never asked for it. Theo had placed it there during her first week as royal keeper and refused to remove it. On this particular morning, Rowan stood beside the hearth, holding a piece of bread over the flames. Alara entered and smelled trouble immediately. "What are you doing?" "Making breakfast." Smoke curled from the edge of the bread. Theo looked up from his bowl. "He's saved the kingdom." Alara removed the blackened bread from Rowan's hand. The toast was less fortunate. Oliver laughed so hard that milk ran down his chin. Julian tried to hide his smile behind a cup. Rowan inspected the burned bread. "It is only slightly dark. It has entered morning. I have eaten worse during campaigns. Your soldiers must have feared the cook more than the enemy." Rowan placed the bread aside. For months, moments like this had arrived quietly. Alara reading beside the nursery fire while Oliver slept against her leg. Julian asking Rowan to attend his shifting lessons. Theo leaving jokes inside official council papers. Rowan and Alara walking through the winter granaries while discussing inspection reports. Nothing between them had happened quickly. There had been no sudden mate claim. No magical bond had erased mistrust. Rowan learned when Alara needed silence. Alara learned that his quietness did not always mean anger. He stopped assigning guards to follow her without asking. She stopped disappearing into dangerous corridors alone. Usually, the children recovered weight and strength. Oliver no longer woke crying each night. Theo could hear keys without hiding. Julian still checked doors before sleeping, but now he allowed Rowan to check them with him. Healing had not removed what happened. It had taught them they no longer faced it alone. After breakfast, Julian and Theo left for lessons. Oliver followed a nursery attendant while carrying both his wooden spoon and a carved wolf. Alara remained near the window, reading a report from a southern shelter. Rowan watched her. She felt his gaze. "You've been staring for nearly a minute. I am the king. I am allowed to consider matters carefully. You are avoiding saying something." "That too." Alara lowered the report. Rowan approached the table. In his hand was not a crown, ring, or royal decree. It was a small iron key. The rust had been removed, but Alara recognized it immediately. Her grandmother's nursery key. "I thought this was stored with the trial evidence," she said. It was. He placed it in her palm. "The lock it opened no longer exists." "I know. I considered placing it in the royal archives. But it belongs to you." Alara closed her fingers around the key. Rowan drew one slow breath. "I have asked you to remain in Stormhold because the children needed you. They did. I have asked you to work beside me because the kingdom needed you. It still does." He nodded. "But I have never asked what I want to ask now." Alara waited. There was no impatience in her face. Only attention. Rowan had once mistaken waiting for weakness. He now understood how much courage it required to give another person room to choose. "Would you stay?" he asked. "Not because my sons need you, and not because White Pine gave you a duty?" Her expression softened. Rowan continued, before fear could silence him. "Would you stay because, one day, you might choose me too?" Alara looked down at the old key. For several seconds, Rowan heard only the fire and the faint voices of children in the corridor. "You do understand," she said at last, "that I am not agreeing to become Luna today." "Yes. And I will not sit quietly during council meetings. I would be concerned if you did. I may disagree with you publicly. You already do." I may need time. Rowan's answer came without hesitation. Take it. Alara searched his face. This could be one day at a time. A quiet smile touched him. That is how you saved us. Three small faces immediately appeared around the half-open door. Theo leaned farther into the room. I told you he was going to ask. Julian pulled him backward. You were supposed to be at lessons. We forgot something. What? Theo looked at the breakfast table. Privacy. Apparently. Alara laughed. Rowan did too. Oliver slipped between his brothers and ran toward the table carrying another wooden bowl. He placed it beside the four already there. Rowan looked at it. Who is that for? Julian entered more slowly. For Mother. The warmth in the room changed. It did not disappear. It deepened. Alara touched the back of the empty chair beside the fifth bowl. No one tried to fill the silence with easy words. Celeste would always be part of the family. Loving Alara did not require Rowan or the children to close the door on the woman they had lost. A healed heart did not forget. It learned that memory and hope could sit at the same table. Rowan placed Celeste's carved wooden wolf beside the bowl. Julian took one side of the table. Theo took the other. Oliver climbed into Alara's lap without asking permission. Rowan sat across from them. Outside, morning light spread across White Pine. The kingdom would remember the night the crown vault remained closed. Historians would write about treason, stolen grain, and the fall of House Vane. They would praise the king who defeated a rebellion beneath his own palace. But the three princes remembered something more important. They remembered a woman carrying 3 bowls through the darkness. She had possessed no title, no army, and no reason to believe anyone would ever reward her. She had simply heard hungry children behind a wall and refused to walk away. That small act had exposed a traitor. It had saved 3 heirs. It had forced a king to open his eyes. And it had taught an entire kingdom that power could build walls, issue laws, and command armies, but only compassion could hear the lives crying quietly on the other side. So this was where Alara and Rowan's story finally came to rest. Were you still here with me? Then perhaps some part of their journey felt familiar. Being betrayed by someone you trusted. Being misunderstood while knowing the truth. Carrying pain without begging anyone to recognize your worth. Walking away from a place that demanded your silence because keeping your dignity mattered more than being accepted there. Alara never needed to shout to prove who she was. When powerful people questioned her heart, she answered through her choices. She could not control their lies, their fear, or how late they finally saw the truth. She could only decide what kind of woman she would remain. That kind of strength is not cold. It does not mean pretending the pain never happened. It means refusing to let another person's betrayal choose your character for you. It means leaving cruelty without carrying it inside you, protecting your dignity, and learning to choose yourself again. And perhaps doing it with better toast than Rowan managed. If one word from this story stays with you, let it be dignity, right? Dignity in the comments. So I know you remained with this family until the final bowl was placed on the table. And if their story brought a little warmth to your day, a gentle like, share, or subscribe would mean more than you know.